is, okay, if the head circumference of a baby is 35 centimeters at birth, then by when will it become 42 centimeters? Yes, who can answer? Okay, can you hear me properly now? Can you hear me? I hope I'm audible. Can you hear me properly? Okay. So we discussed about the normal head circumference. I'll just check the internet connection once. So the normal head circumference we mentioned, I'll just repeat it for you once again. Right. Okay. So I'm audible. Right. So the normal head circumference we said is 33 to 35 centimeters at birth, and it increases at this rate. The maximum increase in head circumference being happening in the first year of life, right? So at birth, if it is 35 centimeters, by 1 month age, we expect it to become 35 plus 2, that is 37. By 2 months, 37 plus 2, that is 39. By 3 months, it will be 39 plus 2, that is 41 centimeters. And by 4 months, now the next month, the increase is going to be 1 centimeter per month. So by the 4th month of life, the head circumference is expected to become 42 centimeters, right? So you're right, Sparsh. Okay. So 42 centimeters at 4 months and 43 centimeters at 5 months. Yes, Swati, you're also correct. So moving ahead, why is knowing the head size or increase in head size important? Because inside our head is a very important organ, that is the brain, and we are interested in the growth of brain because that will dictate the neurological status and the various functions that a child can do. So the total brain volume doubles in the first year of life. Okay, at the age of 1 month, the brain size is approximately 36% of the adult brain size. So what is the definition of microcephaly and macrocephaly? Very important. So we know micro means small. So microcephaly basically refers to head circumference which is less than -3 standard deviations or Z scores below the mean for age and sex. So for most of the anthropometric parameters, we take it abnormal if it is less than -2 standard deviations or more than +2 standard deviations or Z scores of expected. But microcephaly is one such parameter where head circumference less than -3 standard deviations or Z scores below the mean for age and sex is taken as abnormal. Okay, so you must know the definition of microcephaly. All right. Now, what do you mean by macrocephaly? We know macro means large. So macrocephaly basically refers to head circumference more than +2 standard deviations or Z scores or more than 95th percentile of expected for the age and sex. So very important for you to know and remember these definitions. All right. So moving ahead, so, there are some rules of the thumb by which we saw how much should be the expected head circumference. But actually, in practice, we are going to use these charts, okay, these growth charts, which tell us whether the head circumference of a person or a child is normal or more than expected or less than expected. For example, if say at 3 years of age, the head circumference of a child is 42 centimeters. What do you think? How do you interpret it? Okay, at 3 years of age, the head circumference is 42 centimeters. So is it normal or whether the child has microcephaly or whether the child has macrocephaly? What do you think? So 42 centimeters at 3 years. Is it normal or microcephaly or macrocephaly? Okay, very good. Shibeya says it is lesser than expected. Anyone else? What do others think? A head circumference of 42 centimeters at 3 years of age. So let us try to plot it. 42 centimeters at 3 years of age. So this is 3 years. So at 3 years, 42 centimeters would fall here. So at 3 years, you can see 42 centimeters is going to fall somewhere here. So it is falling below the -3 standard deviation line, right? So you can see that this line is the -3 standard deviation, this black line. Okay. And this 42 centimeters at 3 years is falling below the -3 standard deviation or Z score line. So this child has microcephaly. All right. And if it would have fallen above +2 standard deviation or Z score, then we would say it is macrocephaly. So simply by plotting it on the growth chart, you can get an idea. Yes, very good, Sparsh and Shreya. Right. So moving ahead, so these head circumference for age charts are available for boys as well as girls. So in the WHO growth chart, you have the blue colored charts are for the boys and the pink color charts are for the girls, right? Similarly, you can plot the head circumference here and get an idea. So suppose at 1 year of age, the head circumference is 52 centimeters. So you plot it here, you can see that this is more than +2 standard deviations. So again, this baby would be having macrocephaly or large head, right? So let us first discuss a little bit more detail about microcephaly. So what is microcephaly? Who can tell me the definition? What is microcephaly? So microcephaly is head circumference less than how much? Yes, waiting for your answer. Head circumference less than how much is microcephaly? All right, very good. Very good, Swati, Riya, Shiveha, Sparsh. So all of you are awake. Very good. So microcephaly is basically, as we already mentioned, head circumference less than -3 standard deviations or Z scores of expected according to the age and sex of the child. So we already saw that age and sex we are telling, that means in the WHO growth chart we are using the chart, blue color chart for boys, pink color chart for girls, and we are plotting it according to the age and seeing where is it falling. Okay. So that is how we diagnose it. Now, basically, but you should remember that microcephaly is not a diagnosis or a disorder per se. Okay, it is a clinical finding which can be due to n number of causes. So, microcephaly basically should be considered as a clinical finding rather than a disorder. And sometimes, the head size of a baby is so small that even looking at the baby, you can make out that the baby has microcephaly. Like in cerebral palsy, many of the cases you are able to do so. Okay. So you can see this baby on the left has a normal head size, while this baby on the right side, you can appreciate how small his head looks. Okay, so this is a baby with microcephaly. Fine. Now, there are two types of microcephaly, primary microcephaly and secondary microcephaly. So primary microcephaly basically refers to the genetic causes of microcephaly. All right. So some of the examples of the causes of primary or genetic microcephaly are some genetic syndromes like Cornelia de Lange syndrome, Smith-Lemli-Opitz syndrome. So Cornelia de Lange syndrome is a syndrome where you get long eyelashes along with microcephaly. Smith-Lemli-Opitz is a syndrome where you get a lot of midline defects, like you can get holoprosencephaly, you can get cleft lip and cleft palate, okay? And you can get, a lot of ambiguous genitalia, hypogonadism, right? Patau syndrome we know is trisomy of which chromosome? Patau is trisomy of which chromosome? Yes, Patau syndrome is trisomy. Very good. Riya, Shiveya, Nandini, Swati. So I want an answer from everyone. Okay, it is so easy. So Patau syndrome we know is trisomy of chromosome number 13 that you can see on a karyotype. While Edwards syndrome, we remember E for E. So Edwards syndrome is trisomy 18, right? Then you can have familial microcephaly, which runs in families. In a family, everyone is having microcephaly. So you can have familial. Then you can have a syndrome that is called Rubinstein-Tybee syndrome, in which again there is some facial dysmorphism and you have some thumb abnormality. The thumb is broad and deviated. And there's a syndrome called Cry-Du-Chat syndrome, which is 5p minus, where there is a deletion in the short arm of chromosome 5. And this child has a cat-like cry. You can remember these causes of primary or genetic microcephaly by a mnemonic cannot see PEFR in a child. Okay. So C for Cornelia de Lange, S for Smith, PEFR, okay, which we are using for peak expiratory flow rate. So, you know, it is very difficult to do spirometry or pulmonary function test in children because it needs their cooperation, right? So, Patau syndrome, Edwards syndrome, familial, and Rubinstein-Tyree syndrome. So, PEFR, and another C for Cry-Du-Chat syndrome. So, these are some important causes of primary or genetic microcephaly. Moving on. So here we have examples of some syndromes. So what do you think this first child has? This first baby who has an orange colored dress, what syndrome is he suffering from? Any idea? You can see the facial dysmorphism in this baby. And you can also appreciate the long eyelashes, the hairy forehead. Yes. And there's something called synophrys. You know what is synophrys? So synophrys means the eyebrows are bushy and you know they are so dense and the eyebrows are meeting each other in the midline. You can see that in the midline, the two eyebrows are meeting with each other. It is called synophrys. Okay. And there's this hairy forehead. You can appreciate the really long eyelashes. There is microcephaly. There is prominent philtrum, upturned nose, thin lips, so all these are features of Cornelia de Lange syndrome. Very good, Swati and Ria. So yes, this is Cornelia de Lange syndrome with long eyelashes, hairy forehead, synophrys, that is meeting of the eyebrows in midline, bushy eyebrows, and microcephaly. All right. Now the second and third picture belong to the same child. This is a syndrome which we already mentioned has microcephaly and there is some facial dysmorphism in the form of, you can see anti-mongoloid slant of eyes. So it is opposite of what you see in Down syndrome. In Down syndrome, you see mongoloid slant of eyes, which are like this. But here you see anti-mongoloid slant of eyes, like this, down slanting eyes, anti-mongoloid slant of eyes. Okay. Anti-mongoloid slant of eyes, you can see the epicanthic fold over the medial canthus area, and you can see this broad deviated thumb that clinches the diagnosis. This baby also had a congenital heart disease. What do you think is this syndrome? Very good, Swati. Shibeha, yes, very good. So this is Rubinstein-Tyree syndrome, right? So both of these are examples of genetic causes of microcephaly. Right? And you can see some foot abnormalities, the equinovarus abnormalities of the foot. There are some scalp defects which are called cutis aplasia. And there are a lot of malformations of internal organs like renal malformations, okay, and cardiac diseases. So that is Patau syndrome, which you can pick up by a karyotype examination. Trisomy 18 or Edwards syndrome, the findings important ones you can remember by a mnemonic Rocky Mountain. So R is for rocker bottom foot. Can you appreciate this foot which is convex below? Just like a rocking chair, you know, a rocking chair has got a convexity below like this so that it can rock, rock, rock. So similarly, you can see this rocker bottom foot in this baby. Can you appreciate the microcephaly in this baby? The head appears to be really small, okay? So O is for overlapping fingers. You can see that the index finger is overlapping the middle finger and the little finger is overlapping the ring finger here. C for cardiac defects. Okay, these babies can have cardiac defects. K for kidney malformations. And Y is the Y in microcephaly. Right? M for mental retardation. The new name for mental retardation is, yes, anyone has an idea what is the new name for mental retardation? What is the new name for mental retardation? Nowadays, we don't call it mental retardation. What do we call it? Yes. So the new name for mental retardation is very good. Swati, Shiveha, Shilpa, Syed, Nandini, Nikita, very good. It is intellectual disability or ID. We no longer call it mental retardation. All right. So these are the features of trisomy 18 or Edwards syndrome. Now moving on to some important causes of secondary microcephaly. So they include congenital infections by the TORCH group of organisms. Toxoplasma, others like syphilis, then rubella, R for rubella, C for CMV, for herpes. So congenital infections form an important cause. Then there are some maternal causes like maternal alcohol intake, which will cause fetal alcohol syndrome. Maternal smoking can give rise to secondary microcephaly in baby. Maternal intake of drugs like phenytoin, exposure to radiation, metabolic diseases in the mother like phenylketonuria and diabetes. So they can give rise to microcephaly in the baby. Apart from that, infections, CNS infections in the baby during infancy like meningitis and encephalitis can predispose to secondary microcephaly. Severe malnutrition can sometimes give rise to severe secondary microcephaly. Perinatal asphyxia, so hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, HIE, giving rise to perinatal asphyxia, which gives rise to cerebral palsy, is a very, very important and common cause of microcephaly. Some of the metabolic diseases like phenylketonuria, methylmalonic acidemia, citrullinemia, they can also predispose or cause microcephaly in the baby. Now, classically, acquired microcephaly is used for two syndromes, or rather three syndromes: Rett syndrome, Angelman syndrome, and Seckel syndrome. So, Rett syndrome we know is a syndrome where you have X-linked dominant inheritance. So, it is one of the very few syndromes with X-linked dominant inheritance where you have acquired microcephaly, and it is more common in girls, and you see the typical hand-wringing movements and so on. Angelman syndrome, we know the basis of genomic imprinting which can be there, and Seckel syndrome is bird-headed dwarfism. So these are some important causes of secondary microcephaly, right? So these are some important causes of secondary microcephaly in the baby. Now, moving ahead, so we now move on to a terminology that is called micrancephaly. So, micrancephaly is not the same as microcephaly. There is a fine line of difference. Now, we know encephaly. Encephal is the term used for brain. So, micrancephaly refers actually to small brain. So, whereas microcephaly referred to small head, micrancephaly refers to small brain. So microcephaly usually implies that the brain is small, but not necessarily. Okay. So normal head circumference does not guarantee a normal size brain. It is possible that the head circumference is normal, but the brain size is less. So in that case, the baby would not be having microcephaly, but would be having micrancephaly. So microcephaly and micrancephaly are not interchangeable. You must know that, right? But for all practical purposes, mostly we use the term microcephaly. Now, regarding the management for most of the causes of microcephaly, there is no specific treatment. And we know the brain size, if it has already become small, we cannot really do much about it apart from supportive care for the baby and physical and occupational rehabilitation can be done, early stimulation can be done. But very, very important is prevention wherever possible by giving good perinatal care, preventing hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy and perinatal asphyxia, by prenatal diagnosis of genetic syndromes, and so these are some of the ways by which prevention is possible. Now moving on to the second part of our lecture today, that is macrocephaly and hydrocephalus, right? What is macrocephaly? So who is going to answer that? What is macrocephaly? What do you mean by macrocephaly or large head? How do you define it? So it is defined as head circumference more than how much? Yes, head circumference more than how much? What is macrocephaly or large head? Anyone? Very good, Shiveha, Swati, Shreya, Nikita, Nandini, Riya. Yes. So macrocephaly is head circumference more than +2 standard deviations or z-score of expected, right? So now the important causes of large head you can remember very, very easily if you look at it systematically, okay? So large head can be there if there is increase in the thickness of the cerebral or the cranial bones, okay? Increased thickness of cranial bone can give rise to large head. Then large head can also be there if there is increased collection of fluid between the brain and the bone. That can also give rise to large head. Large head can also be there if there is increase in the size of the brain. That is called megalencephaly. Okay, if the size of the brain is increased, there can be large head. And you can also get large head if there is increase in the size of the ventricles inside the brain, that is hydrocephalus. So all of these can give rise to large head. So we can remember it systematically. We visualize the different layers present in our head. So important causes of macrocephaly, as we already mentioned, can be due to thickened cranium, as you see in chronic anemia, okay, chronic hemolytic anemia like thalassemia. Remember, you can get because of the increased hematopoiesis that is happening, you can get increased thickness of the cranial bones, right? Then osteopetrosis also you can get increased thickness of the cranial bones. Then subdural fluid collection, we said collection of fluid between the brain and the cranial bones can give rise to macrocephaly. So subdural fluid collection. Then megalencephaly or increase in the size of the brain per se. Okay, so that can happen in benign familial megalencephaly. So that is a condition that runs in families, but it has no neurological consequences. The individuals are otherwise normal. So benign familial megalencephaly is a condition which runs in families and there is no other abnormality apart from increased size of the brain or head. Certain lysosomal storage disorders like, mucopolysaccharidosis, you can have large head. Then GM1 gangliosidosis, you can have a large head. Tay-Sachs disease, okay? Amino acidureas like maple syrup urine disease and type 1 glutaric aciduria, you can get large size of the brain or megalencephaly. Now, leukodystrophies like Alexander disease and Canavan disease. So Alexander disease is a disease where there is mutation in the GFAP gene, and you can get deposition of eosinophilic Rosenthal fibers in the brain. While Canavan disease is a disease where there is deficiency of the enzyme aspartoacylase, which leads to the accumulation of NAA or N-acetyl aspartic acid in the brain, which you can pick up by MRS or magnetic resonance spectroscopy. Then there is something called cerebral gigantism or Soto's syndrome. So very important cause of megalencephaly, we'll revise once again. We said it could be benign familial megalencephaly. It could be lysosomal storage disorders like mucopolysaccharidosis, GM1 gangliosidosis, and Tay-Sachs disease. It could be due to amino acidureas like maple syrup urine disease and type 1 glutaric acidureas, leukodystrophies like Alexander disease and Canavan disease, and there's something called cerebral gigantism or Soto's syndrome. There's another condition known as hydranencephaly. Hydra means water. So hydranencephaly is a condition where the cerebral hemispheres or cerebral cortex, cerebral hemispheres are absent and they are replaced by fluid-filled sac. Okay, but the midbrain and brainstem are intact. Hydrocephalus is again another condition where there is enlargement in the size of ventricles inside the brain, which can be due to increased production or impaired drainage of CSF, right? So what do you see in this X-ray? What do you see in this X-ray, anyone? So it is a very typical X-ray, which can come as a spotter in your exam. Yes. Very good, Prateek. It is crew-cut skull. Raghav says hair on end. Yes, we call it both. We call it crew-cut appearance or hair on end appearance. Okay. So this is what, very good Shiveha, so and Raghav. So this is the typical hair on end or crew cut appearance. You cut the hair small, 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 they will all keep standing on like this, like the boys usually do sometimes. And you know, in crew cut, in the crew, the people who are there, they also keep their hair short and it appears like this. So it is called hair on end or crew cut appearance that is seen in chronic hemolytic anemias like thalassemia. Okay. And you can, get this finding because of the increased hematopoiesis that is taking place in these conditions as a compensation, right? All right, what do you see here, anyone? What do you see in this X-ray? What is your diagnosis? Yes. So what do you think is the diagnosis here? Very good, Swati and Ria. So it does show a thickened skull in osteopetrosis. You can see that the skull is appearing, or the cranial bones are appearing much more white and denser than they normally are. So this condition is known as osteopetrosis, where you are getting thickened cranial bones. Okay? So osteopetrosis. So what do you see in this picture? भैया दरवाजा बंद कर दीजिए. Just so that was osteopetrosis. What do you see in this condition? So you can see that there is collection of fluid between the cranium and the brain here. So this is basically a black area that you see here. So this is subdural effusion. And you can see the right side picture shows a contrast enhanced CT scan where you can see a contrast enhancing area here beside the brain. So this is basically subdural empyema or pus collection. So subdural effusion or empyema are basically, usually seen as a complication of meningitis in children. All right. So benign familial megalencephaly, we already mentioned that these individuals or these children have increased head size at birth, and the head size remains high throughout infancy. However, their body size is normal, their development is normal, and the neurological examination is normal, so that it does not have much consequences. All right. Now moving on to this, these are the pictures of two children with mucopolysaccharidosis. I hope you can look at and appreciate what the coarse faces look like. You can see the prominent forehead and you can see the puffiness around the eyes, okay? The depressed bridge of nose, the prominent philtrum, the thick lips, the protruding tongue, and in this picture you can also see the corneal opacity. So these are pictures of two children with type 1 mucopolysaccharidosis or Hurler disease, okay? Now, what bony changes are seen in mucopolysaccharidosis? So, in mucopolysaccharidosis, you can get some bony changes which are collectively known as dysostosis multiplex. Now, what do you see in this dysostosis multiplex is, so basically, in the metacarpals and metatarsals, you can see the proximal ends are tapering. So, proximal tapering of the metacarpals, they are known as peg-shaped or bullet-shaped metacarpals, okay? Peg-shaped or bullet-shaped metacarpals that you see here. And you can see what you can appreciate in these vertebral bodies. Can anyone say what can you see? What abnormality can you see in these vertebral bodies in mucopolysaccharidosis, dysostosis multiplex? What is the abnormality that you see here? Very good, Shiveha. So we can see the beaking. Very good. We can see the anterior beaking of the vertebral bodies. Okay, so can you see? Can you appreciate this? So this is the anterior beaking of the vertebral bodies here that you see. Okay. So anterior beaking of the vertebral bodies. So these are what you get in dysostosis multiplex, peg-shaped or bullet-shaped metacarpals and anterior beaking of the vertebral bodies. All right. Now these are some leukodystrophies. So this is the picture of a child, the neuroimaging of a child with Alexander disease, where you can see on T2 weighted images, you can see the hyperintensities mainly in the frontal area, and these appear as hypointensities in T1 weighted images. Okay, so this is Alexander disease, and here you can see multiple areas of hyperintensities in T2 weighted images. So multiple areas of hyperintensity in the subcortical U fibers. Okay, you can see these white areas in the subcortical areas. You can see the abnormality, and on magnetic resonance spectroscopy of the same patient, we got a peak here, NAA, N-acetyl aspartic acid peak. So who can tell me what is the probable diagnosis in this case? So what we are getting is multiple white matter changes. There is a large head, okay, and large brain size or megalencephaly, okay, neurodegenerative disorder, and you're getting N-acetyl aspartic acid peak here on magnetic resonance spectroscopy, MRS. So what do you think is the diagnosis? Very good, Shreya, Swati, Shibeha. So it is Canavan disease, where there is, there is a defect in the gene ASPA, ASPA gene, and deficiency of the enzyme aspartoacylase, as a result of which there is accumulation of N-acetyl aspartic acid in the brain, and you can pick it up on MRS or magnetic resonance spectroscopy. You can get NAA peak. Similarly, we get lactate peaks in mitochondrial disorders, right? So moving ahead, this is the picture of a child with cerebral gigantism or Sotos syndrome. You know, these babies are large for date when they are born, okay? They are larger than other individuals. They usually have tall stature also, okay? And you can see the very prominent head of this child, and the head definitely appears to be large. So this is cerebral gigantism or Sotos syndrome. This is a picture of the same child when he grew up. The head size still appears to be larger in compared to the rest of the face, right? Now identify this defect. We've already talked about this defect. You can see here the cerebral hemispheres are absent and they are replaced by a fluid-filled sac. So who can give me the diagnosis for this defect? Another spotter for you. Yes, what do you think is the diagnosis? Waiting for your answers. Okay, so Shibeha, Sparsh, Nandini, no, Shibeha, Shreya, yes. So it is hydranencephaly. So this is a condition where the cerebral hemispheres are absent and replaced by fluid-filled sac. Hydranencephaly is what it is called. Okay. So I'll just show you the area. See here. Normally in this area, there should have been the cerebral hemispheres, okay, the cerebral cortices. But they are absent here and you just have a fluid-filled sac here. And you know, if you put a torchlight here, you will see a red glow around the head, okay? So that is transillumination, similar to what you get in a hydrocele or in a meningocele. So structures which have clear fluid inside. So trans illumination is also positive in this condition. You can see this trans illumination, the glowing head here. So this is hydranencephaly. Okay. Now moving on to what is hydrocephalus. So hydrocephalus basically refers to enlargement, okay, in the size of one or more ventricles inside the brain. Obviously, we are not talking about the ventricles inside the heart. We are talking about the ventricles inside the brain, which is caused by either increased production or impaired circulation or absorption of CSF. Most of the cases are basically due to impaired circulation or absorption of CSF. There is only one condition which is due to increased production of CSF. We'll be coming to it. Okay. So first, let us discuss a little bit about the normal CSF physiology. So who can tell me from where is the CSF produced? What is the site of synthesis of CSF or cerebrospinal fluid? Where is it synthesized from? Yes, anyone? Yes, anyone? So very good. Swati, Shiveha, Sparsh, Riya, Utkarsh, Nandini, Raghav. So it is synthesized, the CSF is synthesized mainly from the choroid plexus in the lateral ventricles, right? So from the lateral ventricles, the CSF is produced. The choroid plexus in the lateral ventricles, the CSF is produced. And from the lateral ventricles, this CSF goes to the third ventricle. This structure is the third ventricle. So from lateral ventricles, it goes to the third ventricle through this structure known as foramen of Monro. Okay. And from the third ventricle, through this thin structure called aqueduct of Sylvius, the CSF reaches the fourth ventricle. So from the lateral ventricles via the foramen of Monro, it goes to the third ventricle. And from the third ventricle via this aqueduct of Sylvius, the CSF goes to the fourth ventricle. And then in the fourth ventricle, you have the foramina of Magendie and Lashka. From where? So, from the fourth ventricle, you have the foramina of Magendie and Lashka, from where the CSF reaches the subarachnoid space of the brain and the spinal cord, right? And gradually it is reabsorbed in the arachnoid granulations or the venous sinuses, okay? Through the arachnoid villi, it gets reabsorbed. Now, if there is any obstruction to the flow of CSF anywhere, suppose there is an obstruction in this aqueduct of Sylvius, then what will happen? The lateral ventricle and the third ventricle are going to enlarge, but the fourth ventricle will not enlarge because excess of CSF is not accumulating there, okay? So that is how you can get different parts of the ventricular system enlarged in different types of causes of hydrocephalus, right? So hydrocephalus can be basically classified into two types. It can be either communicating. Communicating means all the ventricles are freely communicating with each other. There is no obstruction to the drainage of CSF. Okay. So all the ventricle, the entire ventricular system will be uniformly enlarged. While non-communicating hydrocephalus is also known as obstructive hydrocephalus, where there is some obstruction to the drainage of CSF somewhere. And because there is an obstruction, some parts of the ventricular system will be enlarged while others would not be. So that would be obstructive or non-communicating hydrocephalus, right? Now, the etiology of communicating hydrocephalus include conditions like choroid plexus papilloma, A for achondroplasia, M for meningeal malignancy or metastasis, and P for post-hemorrhagic, right? So you can remember these causes by a mnemonic CAMP. Choroid plexus papilloma, achondroplasia, meningeal malignancy or metastasis, and post-hemorrhagic following subarachnoid hemorrhage. Now, out of these, there is only one condition which is due to increased production of CSF. That is the choroid plexus papilloma. We know CSF is produced normally from the choroid plexus. So if there is a tumor, okay, of choroid plexus, as in choroid plexus papilloma, there will be excess production of CSF, right? So you can see in this picture, we can see communicating hydrocephalus. Why are we saying communicating? Because all parts of the ventricular system are enlarged. You can see that the lateral ventricles are enlarged, okay? This is the third ventricle, which is also enlarged, and this is the fourth ventricle, which is also enlarged. So all the ventricles are uniformly enlarged here. Tubercular meningitis, you can get either communicating or non-communicating hydrocephalus. Okay, so if there is an obstruction, sometimes you get obstructive hydrocephalus, otherwise you can get communicating hydrocephalus also. So this is a CECT head which is showing the basal exudates here. Okay, it is showing the enhancing areas here, and it is showing the hydrocephalus as well. Sometimes you can get some calcifications or tuberculomas as well, right? Now, the causes of obstructive hydrocephalus, you can remember by a mnemonic MAD HIV. So the HIV is really MAD. So MAAD and HIV. So M for mass lesions, A for aqueductal stenosis, another A for anal Chiari malformation, another A for abscess, D for Dandy-Walker malformation, H for hematoma, I for CNS infections like toxoplasmosis, mumps, and neurocysticercosis, and V for vein of Galen malformation. Okay, so these are the causes of obstructive hydrocephalus. So you can see here the ventricles are enlarged. All right. And here, what is, if you see closely, you will see that there is some space occupying lesion here, which looks abnormal. And this is that lesion is compressing on the fourth ventricle. So you can see that the fourth ventricle is small, chinked here, but the lateral ventricles and the third ventricles are enlarged. So this is a cerebropontine angle tumor producing obstructive hydrocephalus. All right. So we are calling it obstructive because there is a structure here, there's a space occupying lesion here, which is obstructing to the drainage of CSF, as a result of which the fourth ventricle is not enlarged, it is on the other hand compressed and thin, and the rest of the ventricles, the lateral ventricles and the third ventricle are enlarged. So this is an example of obstructive or non-communicating hydrocephalus, right? Now, aqueductal stenosis. So, who can tell me aqueduct of Sylvius was a structure which connects which two important structures? So, aqueduct of Sylvius connects which two important structures? Yes, anyone? Aqueduct of Sylvius connects which two important structures? Yes. Very good. Shreya, Nandini, Sparsh, Nikita, Riya, Swati. Yes, anyone else? Anyone else who's awake? Shiveha? Right. So aqueduct of Sylvius connects two very important structures that are the third and the fourth ventricles. Okay. And the aqueductal stenosis or narrowing of this aqueduct is in fact the most common cause of obstructive hydrocephalus in children. So which ventricles will enlarge in aqueductal stenosis? So in aqueductal stenosis, the lateral and the third ventricles are going to enlarge, but the fourth ventricle will not enlarge, right? Now, what CNS malformation is this? Anyone? So, can you see that there is herniation of the cerebellar tonsil? A part of the cerebellum has herniated inside the foramen magnum. So, which malformation is this? So, this is very good. Shiveha, Riya, yes. So, this is called the Arnold-Chiari malformation, where there is herniation of the cerebellar tonsils inside the foramen magnum, right? Arnold-Chiari malformation, there are basically two types. Type 1 is not associated with hydrocephalus and it is a less severe condition which usually presents during adolescence with recurrent headache, neck pain, and lower limb spasticity, urinary frequency. While type 2 Arnold-Chiari malformation is the one that we more often see in the pediatric age group. It is associated with hydrocephalus and often with myelomeningocele. Okay. So that is about Arnold-Chiari malformation. Now moving on. So what malformation do you think is this? So can you appreciate that here the fourth ventricle is enlarged and the cerebellar vermis appears to be absent. So what malformation is this? Very good. Nandini, Shiveha, Swati, Raghav. Yes, it is Dandy-Walker malformation. There you're getting the fourth ventricle enlargement and absent cerebellar vermis. Okay. The scenario very good, which you see in. So Shiveha, Swati, yes, you're correct. This is the vein of Galen malformation. Okay. So this is the vein of Galen malformation, where the defect is in the median prosencephalic vein of Markowski. Okay. So this is basically a misnomer because there in vein of Galen malformation, it is actually not the vein of Galen which is malformed. It is a precursor of vein of Galen that is called the median prosencephalic vein that is malformed in this condition, in this particular condition. Okay. So this is the vein of Galen malformation where you can get a cranial bruit on auscultation. The clinical features of hydrocephalus or increased intracranial pressure would depend on the age of onset, the nature of the lesion causing obstruction to the drainage of CSF, and the duration and rate of increase in intracranial pressure. In an infant, we would suspect it when we are getting accelerated rate of head enlargement. We already mentioned more than 2 centimeters per month, or you're getting a wide open and bulging anterior fontanelle and dilated scalp veins. You think of hydrocephalus. Okay. And brisk in older individuals, especially, you can get brisk tendon reflexes, spasticity, clonus, Babinski sign, and abducen nerve or sixth nerve palsy due to the stretching of the corticospinal fibers, right? And there can be headache and other features of raised intracranial tension. There is also a sign known as McEwan's sign or crackpot sound on percussion of the skull that you can get in cases with raised intracranial tension. So these are pictures of two children with hydrocephalus. You can see this hugely enlarged head, and you can see the dilated veins on the scalp, and you can see their eyes have a typical appearance. What is this appearance of eyes called, anyone? You can see both of these babies have a typical appearance of their eyes. What is this known as? So this is known as, very good, Swati, Shreya, Nikita, Nandini, Shibeha, Riya, Sparsh. So this is known as sunset or setting sun sign. Okay, setting sun sign. You can see just like sun sets, similarly, the eyes are drooping downwards like this. So this is basically due to, impingement of the dilated ventricles on the suprapeneal recess, and due to, the center for upward gaze. Okay, that is getting affected here because of the pressure produced on it due to the dilated ventricles. So this is a sign of hydrocephalus in children or raised intracranial pressure in children. The setting sun sign or the sunset sign is what it is typically called. In older children, as the fontanelle are closed, the sutures are fused, you cannot get an enlarged head size or bulging fontanelle. But in older children, you can get irritability, lethargy, vomiting, headache, and you can see this finding on fundus examination. Can anyone tell me what do you see on this fundus examination here? Yes. So what do you see on this fundus examination here? You can see the bulging disc. What is it called? The sign of raised intracranial pressure that you see on examination of the fundus of the eye. Yes, waiting for your answers. Come on. I think each and every one of you should be able to answer this. I'm sure you've come across this in, while studying, and maybe in your optha postings also, in your pediatrics postings, definitely you would have heard about it. So this is very good again. Swati, Riya, Shiveha, Nikita, Prateek, Shreya, Sparsh. Yes, this is papilledema, or you can see the bulging of the optic disc here. Okay, it appears that due to the pressure, due to some raised pressure, this optic disc is kind of bulging here, right? So this is papilledema, right? So how do you treat hydrocephalus in children? So medical management, we usually use acetazolamide, and acutely for taking care of the raised intracranial tension, you can use 3% saline, and you can use this mannitol, all right, acutely. While for the treatment of hydrocephalus in children, the shunt surgery of choice or the surgery of choice is the VP shunt or the ventriculoperitoneal shunt, where you insert a tube which connects the ventricle of the brain to the peritoneal cavity. And what happens is excess fluid that is there in the ventricles of the brain will get drained into the peritoneal cavity, relieving the intracranial pressure. So ventriculoperitoneal shunt is the shunt of choice for the treatment of hydrocephalus in children, right? So that is all from my side. So these are the things that you must know from microcephaly and hydrocephalus in children. So thank you so much for patiently hearing and for keeping awake in this post lunch session. So if you have any queries, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you so much. Thank you, Swati, Shreya, and thank you to all of you for participating so actively in the class. I'm sure you all will go up and read this up so that, if you read it on the same day when you're being, this thing is being discussed, it will get imprinted in your brain and it will help you remember them very easily, right? So thank you so much, everyone. So if you have any queries, you can email them to me also. Okay. So work hard, and if there are no queries, then I'll be signing out. Thank you so much.